Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel. So I wanted to make another video today. I just posted one last night, but there's been conversations coming up that have made me think that this needs to be covered again. And I just want to give my opinions on it. And that's going to be diet. But before I get into it, I just wanted to talk about that I'm doing one-on-one coaching and I offer it at lower rates than other places online. I've also put together 4-session packages for people who might want to meet a little more regularly, and I offer those at a further discounted rate. So right now I have free 15-minute consultations, 30-minute calls, 60-minute calls, and then the 4-session packages, either 30 minutes at a time or 60 minutes at a time. So you can check those out with my online booking calendar. I will put the direct link in the description of this video. I will also put the link to my website if you're interested in reading more about my bio. You can book consultations or coaching calls through that as well. And if you want to learn more about my story, again, you can check it out there, or I have detailed videos on my withdrawal story, my reinstatement story. You can check those out on this channel. So the topic of diet, I know, is a very complicated, it's debated, it's very individualized, and that goes for not just withdrawal and people in this community, but just in general. I mean, there's an overwhelming amount of information. If you've had any type of conversation about diet with your doctor, you know how that tends to go. They really don't have much nutrition training, if any at all. And if you go the sort of traditional dietitian route, I did this for a long time when I first had diabetes, and it's kind of just run-of-the-mill advice. I don't feel like they really go too personal with it, and even then I find a lot of the recommendations are outdated. And yeah, I mean, their diabetic recommendations are horrific. I mean, if you follow them, you will have the worst blood sugars ever. So just my 2 cents on sort of the traditional system. If you go on social media, you're absolutely bombarded with what should you be eating? What is the proper human diet? What should you eat to get these results or these results? And I have people in my coaching calls asking me all the time, what's the best diet for this? Should I be carnivore? Should I be eating the lion diet, which is promoted by the Petersons? Should I be eating raw vegan? Should I be, and they get really overwhelmed by it. And here's my answer. So again, this is based on my own personal experience. I'm not giving medical advice. I'm not giving advice specific to you or to this is just my general thoughts on it. So in my experience, I have been a type 1 diabetic for almost 26 years. And what I've learned in all of those years is that when you have blood sugars that are more roller coastery, so they're up and down, and this pertains to people who are not diabetic as well. What happens is if you eat, say, something like empty carbs, that tends to spike your blood sugar. For me, it would be much more exaggerated than someone who isn't diabetic. But even if you're not, if you eat those empty carbs, so they're, not a lot of protein, not a lot of fat, so say just like pasta or plain rice or potatoes or something like that, your blood sugar will spike. And then usually if you don't, again, have enough protein or fat to go along with it, your blood sugar will quickly crash and you will become hungry again. And so a lot of times too, or what happens when your blood sugar is up and down like that, and especially when you're going through those crashes, it increases cortisol. And so in withdrawal, most people, at least they feel that they have way too high of cortisol. They have cortisol rushes, adrenaline dumps, whatever you want to call it. And so I think that if you can stabilize your blood sugar, again, even if you're not a diabetic, it will. Again, there's no magic bullet. There's no one size fits all, one answer to this whole withdrawal thing. But I think as far as diet goes, if you can sustain your blood sugar by eating either more regularly, smaller meals, or even better than that is having a very mixed balanced diet. So making sure you're not having a lot of those empty carbohydrates that are high on the glycemic index without having protein and carbs to go with it. So for me, I mean, I don't eat rice, I don't eat pasta, I don't eat bread. And when I do have those, like, which would be an indulgence, I really pay the price for it. I have a very steep increase in blood sugar levels. I have a monitor that can show me a graph, and on days when I eat like that and a lot of empty carbs, my blood sugar, it just looks like mountains and valleys. It's just literally like this. It's like that ribbon candy you get at Christmas time. Whereas if I have less carbohydrates or more complex carbs that tend to not spike the sugar so high, and pair it with a significant amount of protein and healthy fat, my blood sugars are much more sustained and I just feel better all around. So I'm kind of like a guinea pig because I have, again, more like extreme reactions to carbohydrates because of my diabetes. But people who aren't diabetic still have much more spiking and crashing when they tend to eat that way, when they're not having the right amount of protein and fat with their carbs. So just my 2 cents there. Also, I think that obviously there's a lot of fear. Everybody in this community has tons of fear, rightly so. I mean, physiologically, your nervous system has taken a beating, so to speak, from these drugs or the cessation of them. And so you tend to have, and then mix that with all of the stuff you've read online about this syndrome and the prognosis and horror stories, then your fear goes up even higher. And so I think too, it's really important to think about diet from a psychological standpoint, because if you are going to go on a restricted diet, and I don't think the blood sugar balancing diet is very restrictive at all. It really isn't. It's just about pairing your food correctly and avoiding those empty, simple carbs that really spike your sugar. I think if you go into more restriction, and this doesn't apply to everybody, some people, the diet stuff doesn't affect as much as it does other people. And in my own opinion, diet is not a humongous factor in recovering from withdrawal. I think it can help things along in some ways. Everything kind of contributes to the healing a little bit. There's not one grandiose thing that tends to work for everybody. Time really is the greatest healer, but there's things along the way you can do to sort of help it along, or improve your quality of life somewhat if you're going through it. So I think diet fits in with that. And again, there's psychological factors you have to consider when talking about dieting, because if you go on something super restrictive, say on the Lion diet or carnivore, and I'm not advocating for any of these diets, but some people choose to try them. If you're someone who becomes fearful of food in the process, or if you are like, okay, well, now I can't eat anything except for meat. So if it contributes to you feeling worse, as far as maybe it makes your depression feel worse because you feel like food is the only thing that brings you any amount of enjoyment in this process, you have to factor those things in. It's not just about calories in, calories out. There's a lot of psychology around food and cultural things. I mean, food is integrated, especially I think in North America more so, or maybe not more so, but here we tend to think about celebrations and rewards, and a lot of things revolve around food in our culture. And so we have to factor those in when we talk about diet in withdrawal as well. Because if you're going to go on something or choose to try something and it's going to make you either feel more depressed because food is giving you somewhat, even a little bit of joy throughout the day, then you have to factor that in. It's all risk benefit. If you start to become fearful around food, like, okay, well, I'm going to try this diet, and then if I have some sugar or cheat every once in a while, then I don't know, then you punish yourself, or you go into self-loathing or guilt, or even more fear. And I see sometimes too where people will try something out. I think especially if you develop multiple chemical sensitivities in this process, or food sensitivities, or what you believe are food sensitivities, that can make it even more complicated and contribute even more to the fear. So because we're already in such a heightened fear response in the withdrawal in the first place from the drugs, then I think anything that makes that worse, you have to really consider and think hard about what you want to do in that. So here's an example. I've talked to people before that are like, I'm down to eating only one meal. I eat the same meal day in and day out because I'm terrified to try anything outside of it, because what if it causes a reaction? Or they'll start searching, like, again, the brain wants to make associations. So if you go into a wave and you start thinking, okay, what is everything that I just ate? What is everything I just drank? And you are attributing the wave to whatever you just ate before that, even if it's not the cause, then you can start fearing food and fearing anything outside of your very small, I mean, people get down to a very small number of foods sometimes. And that fear, I think, is worse than the foods themselves. And I've been doing a lot of studying into histamine reactions, mast cell activation syndrome, which a lot of people go through when they come off benzos. And I'm not sure if I'm dealing with that or not. I'm still trying to figure out my skin issues ever since I had COVID. But I've done a lot of reading and a lot of research by people who are experts in these fields. And no matter how you slice it, histamine intolerance and MCAS, there's a huge nervous system component in both of those, because you'll do some reading even in the forums when people talk about histamine intolerance, mast cell activation syndrome. They talk about how they're down to, I've seen people down to 2 foods, and then they're even reacting to that. So then it just contributes to their despair and their hopelessness. And from what I've read, when you do that, it's bad for several reasons. First of all is the fear of food. So again, you don't want to be stimulating that fear response even more than you already are in it from the drugs. But also you then begin robbing your body of even more nutrients, because essentially, when you're in an MCAS or histamine intolerant state, you're dealing with a lot of inflammation and potential nutrient and mineral deficiencies. And so if you're restricting yourself really, really, really low, your body can have like a rebound effect, and then it'll start reacting to the few foods you are on. It's going to be robbing you of vital nutrients and minerals. And then that stress response is actually contributing to more inflammation, even more than the food. So that's just what I've gathered and read. And not only that, but the active digestion itself releases histamine. So you can't avoid histamine. It's not like you just go on a low histamine diet and then, you're never having any histamine responses in your body again. That's not how it works from what I've learned. So I just encourage you that if you are starting to develop resentment towards food, even more fear because of food, then just consider that when you're making your diet choices, because in my opinion, that's worse than, say, cheating and eating junk food. I think that the blood sugar balancing, maybe not a protocol, that's not the right word, but just eating mindfully that way, and even considering the 80-20 rule. So eating right 80% of the time, and then just kind of eating whatever you want outside of that plan 20% of the time. Now, obviously, this doesn't go for people who have true food allergies, something like celiac disease like myself. Like, I cannot have gluten no matter what. I've had biopsies done. I had a lot of damage because I had undiagnosed celiac for many years. And celiac disease is an autoimmune response, and your body is like attacking itself when you eat gluten. I'm not talking about that and verified allergies and sensitivities. I'm talking about when you're trying to figure out the best course of action to attack this withdrawal, so to speak. And food tends to come up a lot for people. So if it is making you more miserable, more resentful, more stressed out, it's similar to tapering, or to considering, like, people all often wonder too, should I go back on the drugs? And it becomes very stressful. And I think until you can get to a place where you can do it mindfully and make those decisions with some space between like you and the fear and you and the symptoms, until you can get to that place, don't make any like drastic changes when it comes to like food and things like that. That's just my opinion. Again, let me know what you think about this in the comments. Have you tried different diets? Has it made a difference? Again, in my experience, I don't see it very often where people will say, yeah, I tried this diet and it made a world of difference. Sometimes it is that way. But again, how do you know which one? I tried several different diets in my own journey. I tried autoimmune paleo. I tried keto. I tried very briefly. I tried, like a carnivore diet. I dabbled in like vegetarian and veganism. And for me, it was creating more stress to an already stressful situation. And I didn't see immediate enough results to keep going. And I know that most things within this journey are not immediate. And that's one of the most frustrating parts. But I just wasn't willing to continue to stress so much about what to eat, what to cook, when I didn't believe personally for me that it was going to make that much of a difference. And again, I find that the blood sugar balancing made the most difference for me personally. And that's generally what I recommend to people. And it's not really even a specific diet. It's just being mindful of empty carbs and that spike and crash in blood sugar. So just my 2 cents. Let me know your thoughts. Again, if the last thing we want to do is create more fear and perpetuate the fight or flight response even more so than it already is. And if food is becoming that way for you, then just reconsider maybe your approach to it. And again, don't stress too much about it, because I just don't see it super often making a world of difference for people, similar to supplements. So again, just my 2 cents. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you next time. Bye.